But they all share something in common. They all rely on some LLMs to provide the generative AI capabilities to generate content. Whether it's text, code, or images, they use LLMs. Now, all of these tools are generally not tied to a single LLM or large language model. They can support multiple LLMs. And the other thing that all of these tools share is also the ability to connect with MCP, the Model Context Protocol. In short, the Model Context Protocol is a standard protocol for interacting with third-party services in the context of an agentic infrastructure. So it's a way to declare a common language to share tools across agents and third parties. In the context of Agentforce Vibes, we have one MCP server which is shipped as part of the tool. That's called the Agentforce DX MCP server. And you can also plug in your own third-party tools to extend and enrich the capabilities. So let's start to look at LLMs in the context of Agentforce Vibes. When you work with LLM and Agentforce Vibes, there are multiple models that are supported. These are grouped into two main categories. There is the Pro model and the Core model. By default, you'll be working with the Pro model, whether you're using a free Scratch org or a production org with a paid-for license. And then, at some point, you may end up being downgraded to the Core model. The difference between those two is that there are different generations of LLMs. Some of them, obviously, the most powerful ones are more expensive, and this is why, at some point, you may get downgraded. Here, I've shared with you the latest limits. This is really brand new. We've changed a bit the way we are shipping the limits for the number of API calls to the Pro model. And if you're working with a free org, whether it's a developer edition org or a Scratch org, you'll get access to 110 monthly API requests, and then also a certain amount of tokens before getting downgraded to the Core model. So this is just for reference. The Pro models are really more efficient. They're faster and they generally get the job done better. So if you have the ability to change between one and the other, think first about the Pro models. And we'll see other things that Pro models support. Now, there are two ways to work with Agentforce Vibes. The first mode is the plan mode, and then there is the act mode. When you're in plan mode, you basically ask your dev agent to prepare a plan without executing or without modifying files. It will list you what it understood from your prompt, fetch information to fill its task, and then ask you for confirmation before moving on. This is great when you have a complex task because you can break it down into smaller chunks. You can also make sure that the agent is really working in the right direction and it's not going completely off course before it starts making changes. There's also a deep planning mode that you can use to expand a bit the process of the plan mode. This is something that works best with the Pro model, by the way. This is something like building specifications, essentially. So you ask the agent first to build specifications before writing your code. And then once you're done with your specification, when you're happy with the prompt and the output of your agent, you can move to the act mode. And the act mode will start running the tools, writing the code, and maybe deploying it. So three-step process, generally. First, start with plan mode. Make sure the agent understands what you want to do. Iterate on the plan as much as you need it. And then switch to act mode. This is simply just a little toggle in the interface that will make the whole difference in terms of process. Now, let's talk about rules and workflows, because your prompt may be good, but there's really a thing that makes a whole difference. It's whether you're using rules and workflows in the way you run those prompts. And rules, to start with, are something that provides guidance, but general guidance for all the prompts that you'll be running in your agent. A rule is simply a markdown file with some general instructions that the agent will always follow. It will always follow the rules, regardless the prompt you're asking or sending, unless you specifically ask something that is against the rules, which is fine. But the rules are here to provide a basic set of guidelines. For example, it can be a rule to describe a file naming convention, like you should have files which are lowercase and camel case, whatever. This is a rule. And no matter what you ask in your prompt, the rule will be used to generate those file names. You can use out-of-the-box rules, and you can also create your own rules. These can be toggled on and off as needed, but there's a cost to enabling those rules. And that is related to the way we work with LLMs, because in fact, when you load a rule, it becomes sent to the LLM as part of your request. So the more rules you load, the bigger your request will be, the more tokens it will consume on the LLM side. That's why we're actually stepping away a bit out of rules. In the first iteration of Agentforce Vibes, we were shipping about maybe 10, 20 rules that are part of the product out of the box. And if you've played with Agentforce Vibes recently, you may have noticed that these rules are gone, and we're going to be talking about skills as a replacement of rules later on. You can still use rules, but you'll see that skills have a good advantage over rules is that they're loaded conditionally. They're not always on. So the agent will be smart enough to load them on demand and as they're useful. For example, if you build a rule about mobile development, there's no point in enabling it all the time. If you write a prompt that has nothing to do with mobile, it will just take tokens and blows your memory for nothing. Then another feature which is probably underused, and I find it very valuable, are workflows. Workflows are a way to provide a scripted set of instructions, just like a command, and in fact it works exactly like a command. In your prompt, if you type a slash, you'll have the ability to call your workflows. And a workflow is something that helps you to describe an ordered set of instructions. So for example, here in the example I have on the screenshot, it's called release version. So this actually would entail a number of steps, like for example, bumping up a Node.js version in a file, doing a push, doing a branch, all of these things. And this can be a set of 10, 20 instructions, all numbered in a markdown file that will be interpreted as a prompt that will also be executed in the right order, without having to type specifically anything. And prompts workflows can be interactive. So if as part of your workflow you have some, I would say, variables or things that need to be adjusted, the agent will be able to ask you the right questions while remaining on the workflow. This is extremely powerful. There's nothing that comes out of the box for workflows. It's up to you to create your own workflows. And I find this very interesting because it's a way to unify your work. If you work as a team, to make sure that everybody follows more or less the same process, you can pack workflows as part of your projects to reuse the same set of instructions. Now, let's talk a bit about MCPs. MCP servers. MCP servers are a way to bundle tools that the agent can then use to get information, but also act on third-party systems. As part of Agentforce Vibes, we support connectivity to Salesforce DX MCP server, but also to third-party MCP servers. And what this means in terms of practical impact is that whenever you type a prompt, the dev agent that is part of Agentforce Vibes will look at your prompt and decide whether it needs to use certain MCP tools or not. For example, some of the MCP tools can be retrieving metadata, it can be deploying metadata, running code analyzer, modifying permissions, running SQL queries on your org, anything that is really acting or impacting a third-party system. And we'll see that we can also use third-party systems to connect to our agent to do more and expand the capabilities. So I mentioned the Salesforce DX MCP server. This is the MCP server that is bundled out of the box with Agentforce Vibes. Right now, there are about 90 tools that it supports, and these have a really wide range of applications. The list of those MCP tools is just changing daily. There's daily releases on these MCP tools, and you can do pretty much anything that you would be able to do through the CLI or with the Salesforce API, essentially. So it can run developer tools, but it can also retrieve information and act on your org. Here, for example, you can see how you can call the assign permission set tool to assign a permission set to a given user. Things that you could do through the Salesforce UI, of course, but also some things that you could do also with the APIs. So I'm not going to list all the actions. You can take a look at this later on, but this is something that is frequently updated and expands. Now, in addition to this, you have also the ability to bring in third-party MCP servers. And since MCP is a standard, it means that you can connect to pretty much any system. And nowadays, a lot of companies are shipping MCP servers. An example of the server that you can use, for example, is GitHub. So if you take a traditional development workflow with GitHub that involves a business user and a couple of developers, you could have your business user provide a specification of the feature they want with an issue on GitHub. And then you could have a developer that takes the issue and starts working on it with a branch, and then once they're done, they create a pull request. There's another developer that reviews the pull request and finally merges it if it matches the initial issue requirements. So this is something that would normally take you quite a lot of time, and also means that you would have to switch between different systems to cover this whole life cycle. But with Agentforce Vibes and with the ability to plug in custom MCP servers, you can do all of this within the same IDE. You no longer have to go to GitHub to create the issue. You no longer have to GitHub to create the pull request. You can do this as part of a prompt, and you can have a prompt that mixes different tools. where these are the tools from the Salesforce DX MCP server, like create an Apex class, and then create a pull request. This can all be part of the same prompt, and the agent will be able to pick the right MCP tools from its toolbox to do all of these things together. Same thing for the review. The user can load the pull request content from within the IDE, look at it, have, for example, the Salesforce Code Analyzer run on the content of the pull request, and decide if the PR is okay, merge it without having to go either using the CLI or using the website. They can do all of this from within Agentforce Vibes. So the advantage of having MCP servers essentially is that you don't have to context switch between different applications. You can bring the data in your IDE without having to click all around the place. You have everything in the same space. And you can also automate things. I mentioned workflows a slide ago. You can use workflows to script those things and provide repetitive set of instructions that would use those different tools to automate the work. Now, let's talk about something else, skills and abilities. The more you bring in MCP tools, the more complexity you add on the platform. And so to structure this, we've released two tools that help you, skills and abilities. Skills are a replacement for rules, I would say, because they have one key advantage over rules. They're loaded on demand. So they have a short description and a name, and basically the dev agent will only load the name and the description of the skill, and will decide whether the skill needs to be loaded entirely to complete some instructions. This is a very neat, lazy loading mechanism that allows us to have a lot of skills, and right now there are about 30 of them, and this number keeps on increasing. That helps us to activate the right tool and do the right work. So this on this slide, you see a diagram of the structure of a skill. It's essentially a folder which contains a main skill file, which has two mandatory tags, a name and a description. These are always loaded in the context of the LLM. And if the name and description match what you're trying to do in terms of prompt, the entirety of the skill will be loaded on demand if it's needed. So this is a great way to optimize the load in terms of memory, and it's a great way to pick the right tools for the right job. That's what skills are meant to do. Now, in addition to skills, we have also developed a new feature called abilities. Abilities are a bit different in the sense that this is a passive feature. You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to do anything. Abilities are always turned on. And abilities help us deal with a key problem. When we expand our set of MCP tools that are available to the dev agent may be confused about which tool to use. With abilities, it has the potential to use RAG to figure out which tools are relevant for which tasks. So for example, if you have a prompt which talks about mobile again, it will know that it needs to enable mobile-specific MCP tools. And as you add tools to your tool set, the LLM sometimes is struggling. With abilities, there is a context-aware activation that helps us really handpick the right tools. Abilities, as I mentioned, are not something you can control directly. These are shipped by the product team, so they're actually pre-assembled and delivered out of the box. You can create your own skills, but you cannot create your own abilities. But it's important to understand how this works as part of the life cycle. Finally, the last technical topic I want to cover today, multimodal prompts. This is something I think that is a bit undersold, but is extremely powerful when working with Agentforce Vibes. What does this mean? Well, when you write prompt, most of us think about text prompts, but in fact, you can also use files as part of your prompts. If you're using the Pro model, you can actually use structured and unstructured files. So what does this mean? Structured files would be, for example, a CSV file. You can use a CSV file as part of your prompts, for example. And you can use unstructured files, for example, a PDF or an image to help you build a prompt. And this becomes super powerful because when you mix text and files, you can do really cool things like this, for example. Take a PDF with a diagram that explains a data model with an entity relational diagram. Turn this into an actual data model on Salesforce. The agent is smart enough to create the metadata, create the objects, the relationship between all of these things from either an image or a PDF file that contains the spec. If you were to do this, by clicking, it will take probably half an hour to set up all the right objects, all the right types, but with an image or a PDF, you can do this in a matter of minutes. So that's a really huge time saver. You can do this with, for example, this PDF structure. You can also use structured data sets like a CSV. And you already have a CSV import, of course, as part of Salesforce, but you can do smarter things with an agent. You can have actually multi-object CSV dumps. In the example I have here, I have a single CSV file which contains multiple objects with relationships. Here, this is a list of IMDb, so movie database files, which contains movies, but also actors and directors. So these are sub-objects. And by importing this single CSV file as part of a prompt, the agent is smart enough to break down and create related objects. So that's not something you can do out of the box if you're using the CSV import capabilities on the platform. But with Agentforce Vibes, the agent is able to handle these kind of scenarios in a matter of minutes. Lastly, another example that I find also super powerful, you can use images. So when you're describing a user interface, if you're not an artist, if you're not really good, well, you can just draw a little sketch. You don't need to use Figma or anything. You can annotate it with arrows and explain what you want to do, and the agent is able to turn this raw drawing, I know I'm not really good at drawing, but you can turn this into an actual UI built with 91 components. So this is super powerful, especially for building prototypes and iterating very fast. You can create the first version, but you can also iterate. If you take a screenshot of an existing file, of an existing user interface, you can move things around with arrows, and the agent will be able to refactor your user interface by simply looking at what you're sending. That's it in a nutshell. I know it was a lot. I'm going to try to conclude. So we saw all the different capabilities from Agentforce Vibes. We covered skills, abilities, rules, MCP tools, workflows. There's a lot, really. It was a short session, but I think I gave you a glimpse of all the things that are possible. You're really not limited to just text-based prompts. You can go way faster, and you can be way more efficient if you leverage all of these features to build. So now it's now up to you. Go ahead and practice. Build the next cool app. Thank you so much for your time. If you want to grab some resources, I will share a set of resources. I built a series of YouTube videos that covers all of these features with short 5 to 10 minute videos that explain all these different features with some examples. You can grab from them. I'll let this on screen for a minute. And if you enjoyed this session, I'm going to share also another survey slide that you can use to provide some feedback and tell me how you like it, or if you think something was missing. Happy to take any feedback. All right. Last chance. All right. So if you enjoyed the session, feel free to fill this survey. You can get some coffee out of it, but just send me feedback. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much again.